Hi, this is Liz Butler from Friends of the Earth. I am the Vice President of Organizing and Strategic Alliances. We are super excited that you could join us for the call tonight. This call is to really talk about saving the Supreme Court, the united call to take action to stop the Trump nominee to the court. Tonight, what we're going to do while we're on the phone is that we are going to be talking about Brett Kavanaugh. We're going to be talking about why we need to unite against him, the impact that he will have on environmental issues, plus other critical issues, and how to stop him. Then we're going to spend some time talking about how you can get involved in the efforts to save the court, including next week's Day of Action. Then we'll walk you through how to host a Day of Action during the Day of Action, and then we'll discuss next steps coming out of the call. To be clear, in Brett Kavanaugh, Donald Trump chose a nominee who is not only has extremist, ultra-conservative legal views on a range of issues, but who also repeatedly argued that the Supreme Court should put the president above the law. Donald Trump is at the center of a criminal investigation, and he should not be allowed to pick his own judge and jury. Kavanaugh would rule against environmental issues, voting rights, health care, worker rights, reproductive freedom, LGBTQ rights, and immigrant rights for generations. That's why Friends of the Earth has joined with tons of groups from across different movements to stand up for people and the planet in this moment. These groups include groups fighting for the environment, fighting for voting rights, fighting for health care, fighting for worker rights, fighting for reproductive freedom, fighting for LGBTQ rights, and fighting for immigrant rights. I now want to turn the call over to Eric Pica. Eric is Friends of the Earth president, who's been working on these issues for over 20 years. He's going to walk all of you through who Brett Kavanaugh is, why it's critical for us to unite against him. He will spend some time explaining the threat to environmental issues in detail and discuss our path to victory. After Eric talks, we're going to take a few questions before we move on to how you can engage. Eric?
Great. Thank you, Liz. And thank you for everybody who's taken time out this evening to talk about this kind of gravely important issue, which is Trump's nomination to the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. And, I cannot underscore how important this Supreme Court nomination is. Given the age of Kavanaugh, he's about 54 years old, he could be swinging the Supreme Court rightward for more than 30 years. And unfortunately, he has the track record within the context of the Federal Society and conservative judicial organizations to prove it. Just one example about how bad Kavanaugh could be, and this is coming from the Federal Society's own website, which is like the collection of all the conservative organization, which is the main conservative judicial organization. They say that Brett Kavanaugh has by far the strongest, most consistent, most fearless record on constitutional conservatism of any federal court of appeals judge in the country. And what that means, so let's unpack that, what that means in terms of the Federalist Society. That means that they believe that Kavanaugh is the most effective judge to limit the scope of federal regulations. And so what that means is that the Environmental Protection Agency has a lot of regulatory authority through the bedrock environmental laws, like the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. And Kavanaugh would try to systematically reduce the scope of the legal interpretations of those laws over the last 40 years. What the Federal Society also means is that Kavanaugh will rule time and time again in favor of corporations over public interest groups. And how does that play out? Kavanaugh has drafted many opinions that attempt to pull back the ability of members like you, members of Friends of the Earth, members of Public Citizen, members of National Natural Resources Defense Council, from actually suing the government to enforce regulation. And what does that mean for Friends of the Earth specifically? Well, Friends of the Earth helped set Supreme Court precedent with our Laidlaw with Friends of the Earth versus Laidlaw, where we helped codify the idea that citizens had the right to sue underneath the Clean Water Act for enforcement, to enforce clean water rules. Kavanaugh would take that standing and other definitions of standing and he has weakened and attempted to weaken the ability of the citizens to use groups like Friends of the Earth to sue on their behalf. What he's also done in this empowering corporations is that he believes in incorporating a cost-benefit analysis into the judicial assessment and into the regulatory assessment. And so he has time and again authored decisions which said EPA, despite the lack of regulatory need, should measure how much is the cost to corporation and then rule in that corporation's favor. So and then I think the final piece, at least on the corporate power and eroding citizens' standing, is that he is somebody who wrote and who has said that one of his favorite opinions ever came in Buckley versus Vallejo. And what is Buckley versus Vallejo? Well, that's the foundation of the Citizens United case, where you saw unlimited money being allowed into politics. And he said basically that, this is what he said. He said this is his most important sentence ever in the First Amendment history. He said, the sentence in the Vallejo decision was, the concept that the government may restrict the speech of some elements of our society in order to enhance the relative voice of others is wholly foreign to the First Amendment. What he said is that his favorite historical constitutional sentence basically opens up unlimited money into the political system and equates dollars to speech. And so this is going at a time when we're battling corporate power. We're using every regulatory tool that we need. He is a judge that sees that money is not the issue. More money should flow into the political system, and that citizens don't need to have the right to sue because corporations have the benefit of the doubt. So that's kind of like the eroding of kind of citizens' rights. And then there are a number of other areas in constitutional law that he has proven that he's going to be bad on. And so, we are always acting in solidarity with the reproduction rights community. And so, Donald Trump said himself that he wouldn't appoint any Supreme Court nominee unless they would overturn Roe versus Wade. And so we know that that's his commitment to his base. We know that Kavanaugh wrote one of the dissenting opinions on the U.S. Court of Appeals that ended up being some of the legal justification for the Supreme Court's attack on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And so we know that when it comes to the empowerment of providing people health care or the expansion of law, that Kavanaugh has been resoundingly on the side of kind of corporations, resoundingly on the side of a very conservative judicial philosophy that limits the ability of our government to provide resources, regulatory assurances that people have clean air, clean water, health care, the right to choose. And so this is kind of what this man stands for, and this is kind of the person that has been nominated for the Supreme Court. And, I would say that, his confirmation or his nomination is really if you think about some of the most important Supreme Court decisions that have happened over the last 10 years, I think about the Massachusetts versus EPA decision, which is a decision that affirmed the Environmental Protection Agency's right to regulate global warming gases. Anthony Kennedy, despite being kind of a conservative on the court, cast the deciding vote, affirming the EPA's authority to regulate global warming emissions. With Kavanaugh on a new court, Chief Justice Roberts actually becomes the moderate voice on environmental issues. So let me just let that sink in. We go from Kennedy to Chief Justice Roberts being the moderate voice on environmental regulatory issues before the Supreme Court with Brett, if Brett Kavanaugh gets appointed or gets confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So that's kind of the context we're in. And Friends of the Earth, as soon as we understood that Kennedy was going to step down and there's a nominee, Friends of the Earth, we decided that we needed to fight this with everything we had because of the generational change. And so we are fighting with, in solidarity with our brothers and sisters, with NARAL Action, with Move On, with the NAACP, groups that are opposing this nomination because of the dramatic shift it will create in the courts. And quite frankly, with the Trump administration trying to pass bad rule after bad rule, we know what's going on at the Environmental Protection Agency with former Administrator Scott Pruitt and now with Andrew Wheeler. The courts right now are the only thing we have left. And with Kavanaugh, if he gets confirmed, we have a tenuous grasp on the court as it is. So the big question is, can we win this fight? And, I'm going to say that we can win this fight, but it's going to be one of the hardest fights that Friends of the Earth and the larger community opposing Kavanaugh is going to fight in a generation. The Republicans in the Senate changed the filibuster rules for the Supreme Court, so no longer do they have to have a 60-vote majority. They can do it with 51. And our strategy to defeat Kavanaugh first comes from making sure that every Democrat across the country is doing everything in their power to oppose Kavanaugh. Now, we've heard a lot of good statements coming out of Senator Schumer and out of Senator Durbin and from the Democratic caucus in the Senate, but that's about all we've heard. We've heard statements. Their actions tell a different story. They're meeting with Brett Kavanaugh, and they're beginning to normalize Kavanaugh in a way that we find unacceptable. So the first part of defeating this nomination is making sure that every Democrat across the country, not just the 5 Democrats in those conservative states like West Virginia, Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota, hear from their constituents, Friends of the Earth members, that Kavanaugh is unacceptable and we want you to do more. And that is use every legislative roadblock, obstacle you possibly can to stop it. Review every one of the pages, 1 million+ pages of judicial documents and memos that he's written as a member of the George Bush administration and as a appeals court judge. Hold this thing up and do everything you can to do it. We don't want to hear statements, that are hollow. I will point to in Massachusetts, Senator Markey has done a wonderful job of expressing why Kavanaugh is bad for the environment, but he hasn't done anything legislatively or on the Senate floor to actually stop it. So what I would like is less press conferences, less speeches, and more real action to stop and to roadblock the Senate. Delay is our friend on this. And once safe Democrats start feeling heat and pressure, that means that the moderate conservative Democrats are going to start feeling it as well. Because what we learned from the Affordable Care Act is that unless the senators are talking amongst themselves about the pressure that they're feeling at home, they don't keep each other accountable. And so that is our strategy, and how do we begin to stop Kavanaugh? So let's solidify the Democratic opposition. Let's energize that opposition. Let's show that the grassroots in the states across the country want to see this fight go on and be a hard fight and a delayed fight, and that we will not accept anything other than that. Then once we solidify our base, then we can start pushing for the moderate Republicans, the Murkowskis and the Kavanaughs of the world to actually to vote against Kavanaugh as well. So that's the fight that we're in. That's the pathway of victory. We've done this before with other nominations, both before the Supreme Court as well as other cabinet level nominations. And that's what we need you to do on August 26th. And so I hope that you will be out there, that you will be showing your opposition to Kavanaugh, and that you will be helping us hold Democratic members of the Senate accountable, and that we want them to express and act on, in a way that is a forceful opposition.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a couple of minutes of questions before we actually walk through what does the day of action look like and how can you engage. So if you want to ask Eric a question on kind of either the politics of the moment or any issues that relate to the Supreme Court, you can press 1 on your keypad. I can't promise we'll get through everybody, but we'll take a few questions. And press 1 if you would like to ask Eric a question. All right, I'm going to put Mary Hanson. Mary?
Hi.
Hi, Mary. Do you want to ask it?
Yeah. I just, when he said moderate conservative, when he said Collins and Murkowski, I would really like focus also to be on 2 moderate Republicans, Jeff Flake and Ben Sasse. Flake is not running, and his opposition to Trump's impunity is impressive. I don't like a lot about Flake, but I really have heard a lot of pain in his voice when he's interviewed about Trump, and I think on the issue of Trump's sense of impunity, we might be able to get Flake. Sasse also seems to be, they're both on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so one of my questions is, can this nomination be stopped in the Senate Judiciary Committee? And secondly, can Flake and Sasse be added to Collins and Murkowski as possible Republican votes against?
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mary. Eric, I think it would be great if you could talk about the 50-state strategy, because Mary's right to bring that up.
And so I absolutely agree that, we should be expanding beyond, the Democrat, just the Democrats and the moderates, Republicans that are there. And I think that the idea of Flake and Sasse, I mean, if you look at Kavanaugh's decisions, he actually has, he believes that in many ways the president may be immune from subpoena power, may be above the law in many instances. And so as we're thinking about strategies and arguments to be made across the country, particularly to in a 50-state strategy, and to Republicans that have been critical of Trump, Corker is another one, that this idea that Kavanaugh has a judicial philosophy that he learned through being one of the special counsel on the Clinton impeachment investigation, that subpoenas and kind of being called into court is below a president's time, I think is a very compelling case for Republicans like Sasse and Flake and Corker to engage in this, because it does really kind of tip the balance of power in the as we look at the 3 pillars of our democracy. And I would say, do we have a chance of stopping this in the judiciary? I think if you turn to Flake or Sasse, absolutely. I think that Grassley is the chair of the Judiciary Committee, is really trying to expedite the consideration of Kavanaugh. So he's already said that a third of these records, you're going to try to release before the confirmation hearings begin. And so we do have a real problem with Grassley. And for activists that for Friends of the Earth members around the phone from Iowa, we have to let Grassley know that how he's conducting this confirmation process is just unacceptable. And I think that Republicans shouldn't feel safe in their own state, right? That they should feel as much political pressure and, dare I say, pain as the Democrats need to feel, because we don't want to make this an easy vote or an easy process. And the more even the Republicans hear about how controversial this is, the better off we will be in trying to stop the nomination.
Thanks, Eric. We are going to take Vivian now. Vivian, what's the question that you'd like to ask Eric?
Well, I was just seeing several commercials already about Kavanaugh, all designed to suggest that all these great people, teachers and black women and all this kind of stuff, they're very pointed and say, oh, he's such a nice guy, he's great, he's never overreached. So I'm wondering what would be the plan to counter that particular kind of advertisement on TV?
Yeah, I mean, Vivian, I think that you look at his record. He may be a nice guy that wants to rob your child, wants to take clean air away from your child. He's a nice guy that wants to empower corporations to dump toxic mercury into your water. He's a nice guy that wants to give corporations and the wealthy 1% more say over your government than you do. He's a nice guy that wants to rob a woman's right to choose, right? And so I think that his record, if it's out there and exposed, really tells the story about who he is. And so you can be the nicest guy in the world, but if he is, and let's kind of call it like it is, right? The bedrock environmental laws save people's lives and have been quite successful at saving people's lives since we created them 40 plus years ago. What Kavanaugh wants to do and what his judicial philosophy is to rein in those laws. And regardless of how many children get sick because of asthma, how many people die because of their toxic exposures of these chemicals, that he's on the side of corporations when it comes. We tell that story, and we talk to people about that story and what his actual rulings are. That's how we beat him.
Great. Thanks, Eric. We are now going to take Jill. Jill, what's your question for Eric?
Hi, Eric. I'm a New Yorker. Both my senators are at least on record of opposing the Kavanaugh nomination. What's my work here in New York?
You have perhaps some of the hardest work that folks have. And so, Senator Schumer has talked a good game about opposing Kavanaugh, but I have yet to see him rally the Democratic caucus in a way that shows that he's actually willing to fight. And in fact, in my observations of Minority Leader Schumer, particularly as it regards to the DACA fight that we had at the beginning of the year, he talks a really good game. He kind of starts the fight, and then when the fight gets hard, he runs away, right? And so, and Schumer's even, meeting with Kavanaugh as well. So he is, in essence, beginning to normalize the very extreme Supreme Court nominee by, allowing pictures to be taken with them together, by saying that they're going to meet and discuss issues. I mean, that's kind of, those initial steps are like the first steps in a normal confirmation process. And this is anything but normal. So that would be my kind of my charge to you is, we need to make sure that Schumer is on board fighting this with every tool that he has and demonstrate that early and often. And I would say that the same is true with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She's really strong on women's rights issues, and many other issues. But she's going to have to fight in the right to choose. But she needs to get up there and kind of show up and really take this fight to heart and take it to the Senate floor and delay.
Thanks, Eric. We are now going to take a question from Gregory. Gregory, what's your question for Eric?
My senator is Doug Jones in Alabama. He is adamant that he is going to make a decision based on what is in the documents, the writings, and the prior decisions. Of course, Grassley and other Republicans are doing everything they can to block people from being able to view those documents. And they could have the documents if they would delay the hearings. I just wanted to ask if you have any suggestions of what we could do to accommodate. I suspect that he's not alone, that there are other Democrats that are determined to use those prior decisions and writings to justify their votes against him. So anything you would suggest to help accommodate votes from people in that position?
Yeah, and I think Senator Jones, particularly for the state, I think that is probably the appropriate strategy. I mean, he's not giving up anything. He should be, at some point, though, we have to force him to make a decision, right? So Senator Grassley is not providing all the documents. And so there are things that he can do that we should be asking him to do. Get up on the Senate floor, make a speech about his interpretation of where the record's at. So if you look at his judicial records, right, and his rulings on the U.S. Court of Appeals, right, which is, in the District of Columbia, which is the second most powerful court in the land, you have over 300 decisions where he has chosen on a regular basis the interest of corporations over and over and over again. So if Jones is serious about the record, I think for the context of understanding his judicial philosophy on the Supreme Court, you just have to look at what his writings are. And there is enough there, given Jones's beliefs about climate change and any number of issues. There's enough there to move Jones from kind of taking the safe pathway of not having an opinion on it until he sees all of the millions of, the 1 million documents that have been generated, to the point of opposition. It is there in his judicial writings. And I would say, the thing that, I probably underrepresented in this conversation so far is that Kavanaugh has been making decisions on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, the second most important court in the land. And he has to abide by Supreme Court precedent in making his decisions, or he should abide by it, right? He is no longer, if he's the Supreme Court justice, he is no longer constrained by Supreme Court precedent. As a Supreme Court judge, he can go back and rethink and question and reverse precedent if he chooses to do so. And in doing that, can reinterpret decades, if not centuries, worth of law and understanding of law to the, in the United States. And so I think there's enough there in his record and his opinions to go to Jones and say, look, enough of this. It's time to make a decision. And, you've got to oppose this guy.
Thank you very much, Eric. That was all the time we had for questions at this moment. Now we are going to shift to Britton, who's going to walk us through the day of action coming up next week. I would say, just in keeping in what Eric has said, there's literally a reason to take action in every single state, whether your senator is a Republican or a Democrat. this needs to be a nationwide, large-scale fight in every community, because his confirmation will affect decisions that affect every issue in every community across the country. So, Britton, do you want to walk us through how people can get involved?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Britton. I'm one of the organizers with Friends of the Earth. I'm based in North Carolina. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can all take action together. And, I think as Eric clearly conveyed, it's going to take a really massive grassroots pressure effort to convince the Senate to reject Kavanaugh. But we know that we can win, and we have the pathway to win. So that's why we're gearing up for a massive day of action on August 26th that will unite our movement for civil rights, women's rights, environmental justice, and the rule of law. So on August 26th, all across the country, Americans will stand united in a commitment to our freedom and our future to demand that the U.S. Senate stop Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination for a lifelong appointment to the Supreme Court. So why August 26th? Why did they choose that date? It's actually really timely because the confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh are set to begin the week of September 5th. And the truth is, the timing of this day of action is critical. Senators need to begin hearing from us right away, and every state, like Liz just said and Eric said as well, even the senators that we believe are on our side need to hear from us. We learned from the healthcare battle, as Eric mentioned earlier, that senators are, if they're not talking to each other about the opposition that they're feeling in their districts, they're unlikely to take action. So when people show up in a really serious way in every state, even the ones with Democrats in leadership, like Massachusetts, it sends a strong signal to Congress that this matters to everyone, not just those in certain battleground states. So this day of action is going to send a really strong signal to Congress that we are a nationwide unified front for the fight for civil rights, women's rights, environmental justice, and the rule of law. So we're going to get the attention of Congress with this day of action. We know that the right has been really hard at work to persuade and misinform the public to frame Brett Kavanaugh as a moderate, someone similar and along the lines of Kennedy, Justice Kennedy. Notably, the Koch brothers are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to send this message and convince the public that Brett Kavanaugh is not a threat to our democracy, but that's just not true. So this day of action is being coordinated by MoveOn.org in partnership with the People's Defense and the National Abortion and Reproductive Rights Action League. Participating organizations include us at Friends of the Earth, Planned Parenthood, Indivisible chapters across the country, SEIU, the American Federation for Teachers, Sierra Club, and so many more. The list goes on. So folks across the country are organizing actions that are directly targeting their own U.S. senators because, as we know, the Senate is responsible for the confirmations of Brett Kavanaugh. So they need to be hearing from us right away. So some examples of actions that are happening across the country. I went and looked at the map. You can see the map on the Unite for Justice website. I saw St. Petersburg, Florida. The community is organizing a Women's Equality Day. They're having a Sunday morning service in downtown St. Petersburg to lift up women's voices and song and poetry. They're then heading out for a solidarity walk. And they're speaking directly to U.S. Senator Bill Nelson and Senator Marco Rubio. In Salt Lake City, Utah, the community is organizing a letter drive where you can stop by at any time during the event to write a letter and fill out a postcard or take a photo to send to senators from Utah, Senators Orrin Hatch and Mike Lee. In Austin, Texas, they have a great idea. They're having a Texas-sized postcard party at the Texas State Capitol, talking to Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. And lastly, in Portland, Oregon, they're organizing a honkin' wave, encouraging, a creative participation using messaging and signs and targeting Senators Jeff Merkley and Ron Wyden. So lots of things happening. I am going to pass it over now to Jenny, who is going to talk about ways that you can get involved and walk us through some steps to make it really fun and effective.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Britton. So, hey, everyone. My name is Jenny Bach, and I'm another regional organizer on our team. I'm based in New York. And I'm going to walk you through just, what actions you can be getting involved in that are going on that day on August, next Sunday, August 26th. And, if there isn't a big action being planned in your area, you can also organize your own action. So I'll be walking you through, just some steps and just doing a quick training on how do you go about organizing an action. So just to give you an idea, some options for how you can participate in this day of action include, taking a delegation, a Friends of the Earth delegation to join the local action that is maybe already being put on or organized in your city, and doing a photo petition action, at the actual event where you have people take pictures of themselves and post it on social media, tagging your senator. And for those who aren't near a local action, you can organize your own, and I'll walk you through the steps. And you can actually register that action on Unite for Justice Day of Action's website to recruit other people to join. Some examples, Britton gave some examples of actions that are already being organized to give you, some ideas of if you want to organize your own action. You can organize a rally, a speak out at a local park, that is a lot of foot traffic, a honk and wave on a busy street corner. You can set up a table in a high traffic area to collect photo petitions, or, in front of your senator's office. So those are some ideas, if there's not a big action going on in your community, and there's plenty of places around the country where actions still need to be organized. So now I'm just going to give you a quick training on, the steps to organize your own action, and we're also going to be sending you these steps in the action toolkit that we send out to prepare for the day of action. So I'm going to run through the steps, and don't worry, all of the things I'm talking about will be in the toolkit. So things to, review when you're planning your action, basically a checklist of things to think about. First, you should think about what your goals and your strategy are. And that starts with defining who your target is for the action. And for this action, we're targeting U.S. senators because they're the ones, again, that have decision-making power over our goal of stopping Kavanaugh's confirmation. And the strategy, is how's your action going to impact the target? So think about, how can you do something that will put pressure on your senator? Next thing to think about is your vision. So what kind of event do you want to do? What do you want it to look like? Do you want to hold a rally with chants and signs? Do you want to go to a local shopping center to collect photo petitions? Is it creative and meaningful to everyone involved? And really, paint a picture, like what's it going to look like? What will people see when they walk by? How many people do you want to be there? Do you want to have something kind of to catch people's attention, like music or visuals? The next thing to think about is your location and time for the action. So obviously the date and time is chosen, it's going to be this Sunday, August 26th. And the location, you can think outside the box in terms of where's there going to be heavy foot traffic or something, or you can, again, do it at your senator's actual office. And, another thing to always make sure to do is scout the location. Try to, send at least one person that's helping you plan the event, or you can do it yourself if it's only you and a couple of people doing it, to just go ahead and go to that location ahead of time to just make sure you know what the lay of the land looks like. Will it be accessible for everyone? Think about people's different abilities. Will it be near public transportation? All these kinds of things. Next is to think about your visuals and your materials. So, take some time to brainstorm what kind of visuals you want to include. Try to give yourself time to think about it so you can let your creativity flow. Come up with brainstorm of some slide slogans, and just images you might want to include on some signs. If you want, you can create a banner, with like a sheet and some paint. That easy. It could be that easy. What would you want it to say? how will people hold your all of your props, and definitely it's always important to not make sure you create time to create those materials. It's fun to do like an art making party, or it could just be like you and a couple of friends getting together, making some signs. And it's a great opportunity to recruit people for the action and just say, hey, we're going to do this a couple of days ahead of time. That gets people excited to come to the action. And then the next thing is, of course, thinking about recruitment. So there's lots of different ways to recruit. Pull from your personal networks, your friends and your family. Make a list of people you can email, phone, and text, call and text. If you, can't talk to them in person, that's always best, is face-to-face contact. If you can't talk to them face-to-face, give them a call. And then obviously do make sure to email and text, but personal contact is the best, especially people you know. Social media, Facebook. Facebook events are a great way to recruit people. We have tools to create a Facebook event. Next, another thing to do is just do community outreach. You could do flyering on a busy street corner, hand out posters about the action to local businesses and public meeting spots that will let you put up posters. Send out event details to local organizations that you're a part of or about in the community. And then the last important step is to confirm those people that have RSVP'd to the event. Send out reminders, day before the action, and make sure to follow up with people that RSVP and tell them, you're going to be there, to look for you, all that. And yeah, the other two things to think about are make sure to think about logistics. So think about when you get there ahead of time, just telling people where to meet, the address, all those kinds of things. Make sure to assign roles so people can help you pull off the action. And the last thing is, do the action, document it, take pictures, post them on social media, and make sure to follow up with people that come to your action. Thanks them for coming. That way we can plug them into other things we got going on next. So with that, hopefully that was helpful to think about for planning an action, maybe for this one or for a future one that you want to do. I'm going to turn it over to Brianna, who's going to tell you a little bit about how to plug into the specific things we have coming up to prepare for the Day of Action.
All right. Thanks, Jenny, so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Brianna Steele, and I'm also a regional organizer at Friends of the Earth, and I'm based in North Carolina. So Jenny, you just shared about, a training on, or a checklist on planning for an action. So I want to share, what can you all do for the 26th, or what can we do for the 26th of August? So there are some things that you on this call could do to really help in advance of the action on August 26th. And so two things that would really be helpful. One is helping us make phone calls to really turn out and confirm people who've already RSVP'd to join a Unite for Justice Day of Action in their local area. So helping, phone bank and helping to make phone calls. And then the second thing is helping to send text messages to turn out and confirm people as well who RSVP to join the Unite for Justice Day of Action in the area also. So text banking. And so both of these methods, phone banking and text banking, are things that you could do even if you live in an area that's far away from action happening on August 26th. And something, neat about both of these methods is that one thing that we are going to be doing is using a system, a calling and texting system that runs through our secure system. And so if you're calling and texting folks with us, you don't ever need to share your cell phone number with strangers. This is something that you can participate and do from your own home. And all you really need is access to a computer. And for this calling and texting folks, we'll give you everything you need from talking points about Unite for Justice, also details about the event locations. And we'll even do a virtual training before you start making calls and sending texts, and we'll be on hand to answer questions. So just to give you more details, when will that be happening? We'll be doing text banking, so texting folks and making phone calls, phone banking, next Wednesday evening, August 22nd, and then possibly Thursday evening, August 23rd. So that is just something to stay on the lookout for. And so that's definitely something that a way that anyone can help in advance of the Day of Action on August 26th. And so actually on the Day of Action, some great, two top things of how you can help that day, because it's really important, in this moment that we are as visible as possible. Even if you help in advance with turnout, with phone calling people, with texting people, we really need you at actions, actions that are small, actions that are large. The goal really of these actions is to make it clear, to every senator, to our to families, to the general public, to members of the media, that Brett Kavanaugh is an unacceptable nominee for the Supreme Court, and that the Senate, must reject his confirmation. So, for planning and action, how you can help on the Day of Action, August 26th. As Jenny mentioned, some examples of actions that you could plan. So planning, a rally or maybe a speak out at a local park that has a lot of people going through it, or a honk and wave on a busy street corner where you're using creative signs and messages as people go by, or even having a table in a high traffic area and handing out flyers to passerbys to, call their senators. Or bringing a delegation to participate in a larger action that's already been planned is also another way to show up and be a part of August 26th. And this, really could just be a few of your friends and family or more people. And so, as Jenny said earlier, you can check to see if there is already a Day of Action to be held near you at uniteforjustice.com. And there's, more being added every day, but that's where you can check. And so what I'd love to do right now is we're going to do a quick poll about the Day of Action. So for this, just please respond on your keypad to tell us what you can do for Unite for Justice Day of Action. And then we'll follow up with you after this call with a toolkit and other info. So press 1 on your phone if you can plan a smaller action in your community, and press 2 if you can organize a delegation that is attending a larger action. And I'll just repeat that. So press 1 if you can plan a smaller action in your community, and press 2 if you can organize a delegation that is attending a larger action. Okay, great. All right, so thank you everybody for participating in that poll. So now I'd love to, we have about 2 or 3 minutes for any questions just pertaining to what you can do for August 26th regarding the actions that were shared. So if you could press 1 on your phone, or we'll just take one question, but if you could press 1 on your phone if you have a question, and then we will address it. Okay. One second, just working through some technical issues. Okay.
Bree, can I make a slight suggestion? Can you actually have folks press 3 if they have a question because of the poll? Number 1 and number 2 are already being used because of the poll.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. So if you have a question, just press 3. All right. So I see Lorna. And
Will there be more days of action besides this one?
Hi, Lorna.
Hi.
Thanks. So
Yeah, Bree, I can take that. So the expectation is that because the hearings are going to start right after Labor Day, the main day of action really will be now, because of the need to really make sure there's pressure before those hearings start. So as we get closer and during the hearings, there'll be other ways that people can engage, but there's no guarantee there'll be another nationwide day of action because the hearings are basically starting, almost just a little over a week later.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Lorna. So let's see. I'm going to pass it over to Liz. Yeah. Oh, okay. One other, sorry, and there's one more question. We have time for one more. Drew?
How can I sign up for the text banking and phone banking options?
Great. So there will be an email sent out to everyone on this call to be able to sign up for the slots for the text banking and phone banking for next Wednesday evening. So check your email. We'll be sending that information out if you're on the call tonight with an invitation to that. But great.
It's great. It's great fun, too, because you can sit on a video call while you're phone banking and text banking with other volunteers. So it's like having an in-person phone bank from your own home.
Yeah, it's great. Phone banking party. But yeah, I'll pass it up to you now. Thanks, everybody. Liz.
Well, we're super excited that everybody joined tonight. This really is this very pivotal moment where what happens in the next couple of months around this nominee could really impact everything from our ability to fight climate change, our ability to stop corporate pollution in our communities, to women's health and women's right to choose, to how much power corporations have and how much power we have as advocates to stop and challenge bad things. And the thing to remember is we all know enough about what's been happening with this administration to know that the thing that intrigues Trump the most is the fact that Brett Kavanaugh is on record saying that he thinks that the president is above the law. That's incredibly dangerous, and the precedent it could set if a case comes to the Supreme Court and is ruled that somehow the president of the United States is not held to the same standards as the rest of us, could have implications even beyond all these other issues, because it could set up the stage where they increase really bad behavior on all these issues and aren't held accountable. So because of that, super critical moment for everybody to figure out a way to engage, starting with the day of action and keeping up this fight. It needs to feel like a 50-state fight. Every senator, no matter where they stand, needs to be hearing from people back home saying this isn't okay. It's not okay, that this could potentially mean the end of pre-existing conditions. It's not okay that it could mean the EPA no longer has the ability to address climate change. It's not okay that it could mean that the president's above the law. So we are going to be sending out materials about what we went through tonight about how to organize a day of action, how you can sign up for the day of action, how you can help bring a delegation to an existing event. And just remember, hosting an action could be something really small and simple that you're doing with your friends and family. Taking a delegation to an action that's already planned could be the same thing where you're taking your friends and family. This is all about people being out in as many places as possible. It doesn't mean that you need to be able to organize hundreds of people to come with you in a mere week. The point is, how can we demonstrate across the country that this is a big issue, whether that are small amounts of folks in certain areas and large amounts of folks in other areas. So we're also going to be sending out information about how you can help us with the phone banking and text banking of the people who are RSVPing, which is going to happen in the middle of next week. But we will see you out in the streets on August 26th. Be looking forward to seeing your pictures from the events that you go to. And we do hope that it was really helpful to hear the more detailed cases to how this relates to environmental issues. So look forward to talking to you. You'll be hearing from our organizing team as we get closer to the day, and hopefully we can arm you with all the tools you need to take action. So have a great night.